Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by The Advocate, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys hanging out here on a Thursday midday. We've got the old crew back together, the original crew for the LSU Sports Insider podcast. We're getting the band back together. I guess you guys should have come in black suits with the white shirts and the thin black tie and the fedora and everything like that. But Wilson Alexander is here, our lead LSU football
ready to go on tour.
That's right, baby. Get the band back together. And Scott Rabalais, our venerable longtime columnist, to your right. They are here to discuss many things, but this is going to be almost exclusively an LSU football podcast here in the middle of May, if you can believe it. But we've got plenty of news to go over. LSU is looking at a game overseas, which is potentially big news. Certainly for the fans, we've got NIL to discuss and LSU's approach to NIL. But first, we ought to discuss whether LSU has done enough at the one glaring position of need on the 2024 team, of course, which is defensive tackle, and we will get into that first off the bat. Gentlemen, how you guys doing?
Good. So I guess we're not going to talk about what instruments we would play if we were actually a band.
I would really like to know. Do you?
I mean, I don't know if any of us are musical, but just based on sort of, I guess, like stereotypes, like how these people usually look, I feel like I'd be lead vocals.
That's fair.
I think that Rab's our drummer. And that
drumming is my madness.
And that Perryn is our lead guitarist.
He's in love.
Oh, I'll take that. Yeah, I can dig that. I
can see you shredding a little bit.
I can't sing and I can't dance at all, and I wish I could. I know Rab knows this, that my favorite musician of all time is Prince, and there's not even a second place. So I'd love to get up there like he did with, My Guitar Gently Weeps, and just shred everybody's face off and throw the guitar right off the stage and walk off like a G. But I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think anybody else who's tuning into this fine podcast is interested. So let's get this thing back on the rails. Of course, we're here on the LSU Sports Insider every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. You can search for LSU Tigers on NOLA.com on YouTube. You should be able to find our channel. You can subscribe. That way you'll never miss an episode, and you can catch us live there every Monday and Thursday. And if you don't catch us live, you can catch us anytime you like after the fact on that same YouTube channel. We are also here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you can. That way we can find more LSU fans, and more LSU fans can find us. So please do that if you get the chance. Search for LSU Sports Insider. Of course, we are, we're here every day, all day to cover LSU as nobody else does at The Advocate. So please join the party and subscribe to The Advocate. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe, whether that is in print or digital. And of course, as we often say, as we always say, there is always something going on campus, multiple things going on campus. Even really when we get into the summertime, it seems like there's always something going on, and you don't want to miss any of the breaking news and any of the stories. You can get all the headlines delivered in one place and sent to your inbox, to your phone, to your desktop with the LSU newsletter. So sign up for the LSU newsletter at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Okay, so this is not breaking news at all. We know for sure that, and we have known basically since season's end that Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo decided they were going to hit the road and go to the NFL, and it ultimately wound up being the right decision for both of them, perhaps a little bit surprisingly, especially in terms of Mason Smith. But that left LSU with a glaring hole at defensive tackle. They took lots of swings and they whiffed. They whiffed on several marquee players in the transfer portal. And so now they found themselves with Gio Paez, who's going to amount to a converted defensive end. From Wisconsin.
No, not quite.
Well, he
was listed as a defensive. I know he was listed as a defensive end at Wisconsin, but I talked to him about that. He goes, I don't know why they did that because I played 3 tech.
He played much more inside. Yes.
Yeah, he exclusively played inside.
But sort of a kind of a role player, defensive end / defensive tackle, however you want to look at it. He's one spot that they filled, and also a new addition from Grand Valley State, just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Named Jay'viar Suggs, and that commitment happened Wednesday night. So, Wilson, what can you tell us about him?
Well, Jay'viar Suggs is someone who LSU looked at kind of once it went, at that point, 0 for 4 on its after adding Paez, which was an addition before the portal even opened.
Right.
They were 0 for 4 looking at, Philip Bliddy, who went to Auburn, Simeon Barrow, who went to Miami, Dominic Williams, who went to Oklahoma, and then CJ West, who went to Indiana. And so, West had never gotten on campus, but LSU had offered him. And Bliddy was someone who took a visit and went to somewhere else. And then, Williams and Barrow were the two main targets, of course, as everybody knows. Did not work out. NIL was a big factor there in their ultimate decisions, as we understand it. So, they turned to Suggs, a guy who, is making a leap from Division II, but who a lot of big-time programs had interest in. Especially, this defensive tackle market wasn't flush with players here in the second portal window. So a guy like him going in the portal for teams that are trying to add at that position where you want depth, you want players. He became attracted to a lot of big programs. He had in his Final Four, LSU, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the defending national champion and 2 other Power 4 programs. Right. And
they weren't beating out South Alabama and Sam Houston State.
Exactly.
Like that.
And they got him to come all the way from Michigan. He's a Michigan native, and Michigan had offered him, and he's, going, I guess, a couple hundred, maybe over 1,000 miles from home to come play at LSU. There was a good connection there for LSU. Brian Kelly, of course, got his start in coaching really at Grand Valley State. That's where he was first a head coach over 3 decades ago. He won 2 Division II national championships there, and then he's continued to sort of stay close to people around that program ever since then. And his son Kenzel was a player there, and here recently, and actually played with Suggs. And so they were able to get him. He had released a top 6, and was basically shutting down his recruitment at that point. LSU offered him. This was last week. He then put out a revised top 4 the next day that had LSU in it, took a visit, and the day after his visit finished picked LSU. And so that's kind of how some of that shook out. I think the connection there really helped LSU get in there late, even though it seemed like he was ready to sort of shut things down. That connection with the Kelly family. He also played at high school football with Garrett Dellinger, the left guard. And so that all seemed to help kind of work out in LSU's favor for them to finally, after whiffing 4 times, be able to get a defensive tackle at least in the building.
So Wilson, you mentioned, as I'm just going to go through the 4 names again: Dominic Williams, Simeon Barrow, Philip Bliddy, CJ West. These were all players that certainly LSU would have and probably did promise playing time. Hey, you can come here and play. We've got needs. You're going to contribute right away. But they went 0 for 4. And we know this, but I'm asking you the question, Rav. I'm going to tee you up and just say, why did LSU struggle in the portal with these positions? Because they could have done more. Had they been, it doesn't mean that they would have been guaranteed to get any of these 4 players, but they could have done more had they chosen to.
Yeah, I think as Wilson very capably wrote about a couple of days ago about talking about LSU's position on NIL to say, look, we want to make offers, but we don't want to overspend or create some kind of imbalance in our locker room that's going to cause us some problems in terms of the team chemistry and everything. And it was just kind of a little bad luck on LSU's part that it was such the market, if I had to use that term, but it's such a market for these defensive tackles. They're at a premium. These guys are commanding large NIL packages, and other schools decided just to kind of break the bank on them. And LSU said, we're not going to do that. So they scoured. They went back and found a guy who, as Brian Kelly, I just spoke to Brian Kelly before I came here for an interview. We talked about a variety of topics, and he said, he's going to add to depth. He's not coming in here. He didn't say this, but I don't anticipate they're expecting Suggs to come in and be an All-American. But he's got to add depth, and he's going to, they've got 9 defensive tackles now with him and Paez and incoming freshmen like Dominic McKinley. So there are some numbers there now. They're getting there, and this is where they're going to be. He said this is the last guy that they were looking to add at the defensive tackle position. That surprised me a little bit, but that's what he said. So that's where they are. And it's not maybe a Hall of Fame, a group of Hall of Famers necessarily, but you have a good coach in Bo Davis, and they're hoping to make it work this year. Certainly better than it did last year for their defense overall.
If you were to break down those 9 just real quick, just kind of let's especially now that, like Brian Kelly told you, they're done adding at that position. This is what else he's going to go into the season with. Then you've got 2 6-year seniors in Jacobian Guillory and Jalen Lee. You've got Ahmad Bro, who's one of the 9 now, who is a really defensive end. He's like listed about just under 260.
Incoming freshman.
Yeah, he was an early enrollee, and they changed his position. On the roster to a defensive tackle, so he's going to have to beef up to be able to play inside. Kimo Makanioli, who is a converted offensive lineman, has only just really been playing it at the college level since this spring. Dominic McKinley, the 5-star freshman. Your 2 transfers, Paez and Suggs. And then there are 2 more who I am suddenly forgetting. No, scholarship guys, 9 scholarship guys. Would be Sean Washington,
That's
junior
right,
college transfer. And then I am so sorry to the 9th person who I can suddenly not
pretty
remember.
Good. Mine's pretty good.
As far as I'm concerned. So anyway, we're going to get back to that person in a minute. I'm going to look it up. We're going to find it. And I apologize to this person whose name I suddenly can't remember. But all to sort of lay out and say, like, LSU, and they do have a preferred walk-on, Preston Hickey, who is probably going to be in the mix in some capacity, at least here in Paul Camp for playing time. Because there's no clear pecking order other than, like, Jacobian Guillory is probably one of your starters. But he's never been a full-time starter. None of these guys have ever really been full-time starters, certainly at LSU. I mean, Paez, started 6 games last year at Wisconsin. Suggs started a bunch at Grand Valley State, but he's making a huge jump up here from Division II to the SEC. Dominic McKinley's a 5-star, but is he ready to come in and play right away? The closer you are to the ball, the harder it is to play as a freshman, and it's it's a tough situation for them to kind of be in right now at defensive tackle. It'll be interesting to see if they consider playing anybody else inside, getting creative with their packages. LSU's own coaches, I mean, you thought this was a position of need. Brian Kelly sort of circled it as the thing that they had to get better at. I don't want to sit here and say in May they didn't get better. They went out and they tried to add some guys, but now they're going to have to go and develop them because they didn't get the people who on paper looked like instant impact. Like, you just plug them in and play and you go. They're going to have some work to do on a coaching staff to make sure that this position group can hang in the SEC.
What we know was at the end of the season, once Smith and Wingo both bailed out, and God bless them, wish them the best of luck in the NFL, obviously, but we knew that at that time, LSU didn't have a lot of guys. Now they got guys. So at the very least, it's up to, just as you said, Wilson, now the coaching staff to get the most out of those guys and put together a decent...
Demarion Johnson.
There you have it.
Sorry, Demarion Johnson, early enrollee freshman, 3-star recruit.
And to that end, one of the things Brian Kelly said, they're not looking for any of these guys to play 30 or 40 snaps a game. What was one of the things about Mekhi Wingo said during his time here is that, man, I really had to play a lot of snaps, especially after Mason Smith got hurt in 2022 in the first game. So I think they're looking to build a rotation, right? And you got Bo Davis in here. He's supposed to be a very good defensive line coach. He's got a great reputation, former Tiger, former assistant here. He's going to have to develop these guys. And look, you had 3 defensive tackles, and Brian mentioned this in our interview this morning. They had 3 defensive tackles get drafted in the NFL, Mason and Wingo and Jordan Jefferson, and they still weren't good on defense.
Right.
So you got to develop who you got. And like I said, I don't think they've got a bunch of All-Americans at defensive tackle. I'm not going to say that, but you've got at least numbers to work with when, right after the season, it's like, ooh, they hardly, after these guys started announcing they're going, they hardly have anybody. So it's been a tough situation and a tough position for a lot of reasons. As Wilson and I discussed, recently, said how many defensive tackle coaches they've gone through, defensive line coaches they've gone through since Ed Orgeron was the defensive line coach, and for various reasons, firing guys who weren't healthy, guys who left to go for other positions, and it's been an unstable position, and it's got to be a stable position. Defensive line and offensive line, you got to start there if you're going to be an SEC national contender. You got the offensive line in good shape. This is something that's still coming, and as Kelly alluded to in our talk, they're still building that depth, still trying to get there in year 3. It's not ideal. I'm not making excuses for them, but it is what it is, and this is how they're going to have to
But again, I mean,
roll this year.
Right. This is why you pay. I'm not going to say overpay because the market is what the market is. He dictated a high salary and he got it because he was a wanted man, so to speak. But this is why you pay that much money to Bo Davis. Not only is he thought of as an ace recruiter, but a good technical teacher. And you have, I think this goes back to like, if you're the coaching staff, you're sitting around saying, we've got to get this fixed. No more half measures, no more games, no more anything. We've got to get a guy in here who we think is going to be a great teacher, but also maybe somebody who's got more than one incentive, not just monetary, to want to stick around for, more than 15 and a half minutes. So, there you have it. You mentioned, Rab, the Wilson's excellent story, if I may say so, up on the Evident.com. Basically, the explainer about LSU's approach to NIL and how that played into how, a general explainer on how they're going to do it long term and how they're doing it right now. But also sort of juxtaposed against why they did or didn't, or why they could or couldn't bring in these sort of top-tier defensive tackles. And so I will put this question to both of you. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I'll put you on the spot first, Rab. Is this approach the right approach for LSU, and will it work long term?
I think it's the approach LSU has to take. LSU's never going to be the school that has the most NIL money. As Wilson's story said, their collective has improved. They've gotten more money in, more people involved, but they're not. They don't want to break the bank on one person. They want to develop players and say you're going to get your money once you come in here and show what you can do. They don't want to overpay on some high school kid or some some transfer who is only going to be here for a short term. They're trying to build for the long term. But then you have to look long term as to where NIL goes from here. As Brian alluded to, he believes that there's going to be and Wilson can speak to this better than I can. He believes there's going to be a solution to this soon in terms of some kind of revenue sharing with players. That there's a solution that's going to be reached soon, and this is all going to change again. So I think for the some people might say, you're just saying, you're just patting LSU on the back. I'm not. I think I'm being realistic in saying this is what it is, and it's going to change again in this what has been a rapidly changing situation. And I think they've been prudent. I don't want to see them spend $2 million on one guy, or I don't care how desperate you are. I just think that's foolish, and it's just in bad taste, for lack of a better term. So I like that they've gone with the more prudent, measured approach. And it didn't help them get these two really stud defensive tackles that everybody wanted. But in the long term, I think they're going to be to have showed that this is more the path to go on.
I think that it can work. Will it work? Will it not work? My crystal ball is too cloudy.
Right.
But it can work if what LSU prioritizes, which is retention, if they're successful in doing so. The reason that LSU got in this place at defensive tackle this year is it couldn't retain Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith. At least one of them, if not both of them. It offered them, NIL packages that would have been among the tops of the team for them to come back. They obviously did not. LSU was going through this coaching change with the defensive line, even though at the time that when Mekhi declared, they hadn't fired everybody yet. When Mason declared, they hadn't yet hired Bo Davis. And so they both left. But there's all this coaching mess. And now that LSU has maybe settled that with hiring guys like Kevin Peoples on the edge and Bo Davis on the interior, if you can get guys in the building and build those relationships and trust with your coaches and develop players and show them what you can provide them from that aspect, then maybe you do a better job of retaining in the future. And if they do a better job of retaining, then it can work because you see their 2025 class right now is potentially going to finish as the number one in the country. You've got the number one player in Bryce Underwood. They got to continue to add guys on the defensive line in this 2025 class. They have not addressed that yet in this class very much, but they, at least from an overall ranking perspective, they are recruiting well on the high school level. Now they have to keep those players on campus. If you can, then yeah, this can work. If you use NIL to retain, then the approach can work because you'll have recruited well, you'll have good players on your roster, you'll develop them with good coaching, and over time you'll get there. The problem is maybe, that's why they got themselves again in that position, was that they weren't able to retain. So it can work if they can retain, but you have to maybe reassess. I think what this season and maybe even 2025 will show is whether or not they have to reassess if they are in a position where they were not able to retain, because it's going to be hard to do that. Other teams, tampering goes on. Then people want NIL money, but so that they might have to reassess that in a couple of years if it isn't working. But if it can work, but when long term it can. It's just we'll have to see if it does.
And NIL money is not everything. It's a huge thing. But part of the reason they couldn't retain these guys, right, was the uncertainty of the defensive line coach, right? And
that's what Mason Smith said was two things. So he had gotten some draft feedback that was positive. Obviously, he clearly ended up going, second round. So like
top 50 pick.
That's
but
I don't. This is going to fall out of my head. So I'm sorry, Wilson, for cutting you off. But I just want to. When we're talking about retaining players, I think it is important to make a distinction between, trying to keep them from going to the NFL versus trying to keep them from saying, okay, I want to go out on the free agent market and see if Florida State's going to pay me more than LSU can pay me.
Well, it's both.
Yeah, no, it is both. But I mean, I think the lure of the NFL is probably stronger in most cases to the average football player. That if I've got the option to go to the NFL, that might pull me a whole lot more than the potential to just stay in college, whether I'm going someplace else or staying where I am in college. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the way to sort of be able to withstand both a departure for the NFL or a guy who decides he wants to try to go get more NIL money is recruit better at that position so that you can take it if somebody leaves. They weren't in a position to be able to withstand losing both of those guys in particular. And so they have to continue to recruit better on the high school ranks. And that's why maybe having a defensive line coach here who will be here for more than 2 calendar years in Bo Davis will help in that regard. But you're also looking in that situation at 2-3 years down the line as that paying off, not necessarily like a quick fix. So that's why you start to worry about, are they going to be hampered in 2024 by this? Right. Because they could be. And, long term, maybe it works out. But in the short term, they made a decision that I think people are going to question throughout the season. It's going to become a big talking point throughout the season. If LSU is not good on defense, people are going to come back to this time period quite a bit to talk about.
Right. That's right. This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work, including Wilson's great explainer on NIL and LSU and their approach. That is at theadvocate.com. So please subscribe. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Please sign up for our newsletter. You get all the headlines delivered straight to your inbox, sent to your inbox. So you don't have to go searching all over the internet. For the latest headlines, you can go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. And of course, we are here every Monday and Thursday on the LSU Sports Insider on all our social media channels, but specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. So please search us out, follow us along, subscribe, and that way you'll never miss another episode. And of course, if you don't catch us live, you can catch us after the fact. And if you don't catch us there, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever other finer podcasts are found. Okay, so
hang on.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Before we move on from the NIL topic, I did just want to make one more sort of point, which is this is how the model works at the current moment. Like we're talking about, long term is going to work. We also, like Rab said, revenue sharing is on the horizon. That is coming as a result of a likely settlement in the House antitrust case. But what's unclear is what the role of NIL and booster-led collectives is going to be if we get to revenue sharing.
After the fact.
It could end up being the gravy on top of your potatoes being revenue sharing. And if there are schools that have still really strong, financially lucrative collectives on top of that, then those places could become just even more powerful, which is why it is maybe still critical that LSU continues to catch up and add fundraising and dollars and become more sustainable with its collective, because the collective, which can also potentially move in-house here soon, this is the way it stands right now. But as we talk about like a long-term future, there's still a lot of questions about what exactly this is all going to look like. So just to say, like, it's hard to really fully predict like if this approach works or not, because the rules of the game are kind of ever changing, and especially going to be over the next couple of years. That's all.
No, yes, it's this may be the approach that LSU is taking right now may be the right approach, but then just as you say, the entire landscape may change. It's going to change here in the next year or a couple.
And
of
every
years.
school is trying to figure out
That's right.
what's the best path, and somebody's going to be proven right, somebody's going to be proven wrong. So.
Revenue sharing is going to amount to players, particularly at the Power 4 schools, getting paid a salary or what amounts to a salary because they will be. In so many words, viewed as an employee. And so then maybe the NIL collectives will, just as you say, be the cherry on top. In which case it may very well still, I mean, not to put too long a tail on this kite, but you all have heard me say this. Listen, Louisiana only has, 2 Fortune 500 companies? And so many, let's call it what it is, so many billionaires. Texas has how many? The state of Texas has how many Fortune 500 companies and how many multi-billionaires? At some point, you have to worry, for LSU's sake, that the billionaires just continue to outspend, and then that puts LSU in a specific spot. But it does go back to the ace in the hole that you have if you're LSU is that you've got so much homegrown talent, and so if you place a great emphasis on the lure of home and keeping players home, that's strong and can overcome some of that money, in my opinion, anyway. So let's talk.
That's what they're banking on.
Yeah, that is, and I think that's what they really kind of have to bank on in many respects. So let's talk about the final. Rab, if I'm not mistaken, you said Brian Kelly confirmed that they're at 82 or 83 scholarships now.
It'll be 83. Yeah.
83. So that would leave, for all intents and purposes, 2 spots open. I thought, probably not thinking this through all the way, and it certainly was before Brian Kelly confirmed, yeah, we're done. We're done with defensive tackles. Maybe defensive tackle. I think maybe punter is still a position that they can take a look at. I'm not saying for sure that they have a desperate need, but given what we see in terms of the hard evidence, it would make sense that maybe they're a little leery about what they see with their punting position. I was thinking running back, but the more and more I thought about that, that's really not a need. It's not nearly as much a need as it was based on what they had in the spring. What they had in the spring was not going to be a full picture anyway. So you guys, and I'll let you go with this, Wilson, but maybe DB, maybe edge rush or something like that. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think those are certainly 2 spots that LSU is looking at, because at this point, okay, if they're done addressing defensive tackle, part of the reason they might be done addressing defensive tackle is there's just there might not be anybody else out there who really catches their eye, or who they've evaluated and think fits on the roster or what they're trying to get. So now you look to add, probably like it's almost like an NFL draft sort of thing. Like, okay, now add best available, particularly at positions of need if you can do it. But like DB would be one of those positions of need where you can also add best available. Then maybe you improve your defense. They've been linked to Wesley Walker, who's a former, he's been kind of all over the place. I think Georgia Tech, Louisville, Tennessee, maybe too. And he's been around quite a bit, and he's got some good playing times, over the course of his career, some good experience. And he, I think, is going to be taking an LSU visit here fairly soon, and so that could be somebody who they could add. And then, they've also been linked here recently, according to multiple reports, to Tyler Barron, who was a former Tennessee transfer. But that I'm not sure exactly how that one is necessarily going to work out. I think there would be some hurdles with his, because I believe he committed to Ole Miss, so they would. But we'll see exactly how that would go. But the that's 2 right there, which would bring you up to your 85. If something like that doesn't work out, then punter might be a place that they should look at. Like you said, that was uncertainty coming out of the spring. Running back there. They seem to believe that Trey Holly will be available for the season, so that gives them 4, and they seem to feel comfortable with that based on just the amount of roster space that they have. They are trying to add elsewhere, and they believe they'll have Holly. There also isn't like a running back on the market who would make a lot of sense to take. There's I think for them getting back Holly, assuming his legal situation were to work out in their favor, would be the best sort of outcome for them. So,
Rab, any thoughts?
Brian wasn't specific about whether the positions they're looking at, but certainly defensive back and edge rusher seem like those are positions of need. You got to continue to try to shore up the defense as you can. It's kind of funny to be talking about running back, these days compared to 20 years ago, when it's like they got enough.
Yeah.
It used to be like got to have a lot of running backs because we're going to run the ball all the time. And they didn't have a fullback anymore. No,
Not really.
No. They haven't had a fullback since who was it? Torrey Carter.
It's just how the game has changed and how the running back position, where Heisman Trophy winners came from every year, is now so de-emphasized. But yeah, to the point of the current team, probably adding a couple more players on defense seems to be the way to go.
One thing I wanted to clarify was that Tyler Barron, he committed to Ole Miss, then entered the portal. Then he went to Tennessee to Louisville instead, and then he entered the portal. So anyway, he's out there and an edge guy who would be one of the better players on the market if LSU can end up. I think they're trying to maybe get him to come to campus, and we'll see if he ends up making that visit or not.
Well, I'll speak for myself. It sure feels like, in terms of potential, LSU's got some potential coming off the edge. But again, everybody saw it. They did not generate much of a pass rush, and on a consistent basis anyway, in 2023.
And just to remind folks, players can no longer enter the portal, but if they're in the portal, you can still go after them.
That's correct.
It's a finite and obviously dwindling number, to Wilson's point, of players out there that you could even get. So, like Brian Kelly said, you can get up to 85. He'd be happy to add a couple more, but I don't think they're going to just take anybody, necessarily.
Yeah, they don't have to reach necessarily. Like, there's no point in reaching for someone who doesn't who they wouldn't feel very strongly would improve their team in some way.
Okay, so Rab, you just had a cup of coffee this morning with Brian Kelly and a
bottle of water in my case, but yes.
Okay, there was no fireside perhaps, but no fire to have a fireside chat. But nonetheless, I got a good 30 or so minutes with Brian Kelly one-on-one, and he detailed something that I think will be of extreme interest to LSU fans, among many things that he said. But I found this to be the most intriguing, sort of in a big picture thing, and that is they may have some considerable shipping costs in the years to come, or at least in 1 year specifically. What can you tell us about a potential game overseas?
Yeah, they won't be able to take the 18-wheeler, the equipment truck.
It's not going to work well.
It's not going to work.
One hell of a
plane.
I kind of talked to them. I revisited this subject. Wilson and I talked to him, last spring, and I kind of made the joke. I said, "Yeah, these teams are playing in Ireland. You guys need to go play with." They said, "Yeah, we're working on that." And so I asked him about it again today, and he said, "Yeah, they're contracting with a new travel company that tends to bring these things together. You match teams with opportunities to play, and he would really like to see LSU play in Ireland. These games I think are all in Dublin sometime in the near future. Didn't give any specifics about who they would play or when they would play, but he helped facilitate this when he was at Notre Dame. They played twice there, once while he was a coach and once in a game that happened in 22 once he was over here at LSU. And we're seeing some other games there this year. Georgia Tech and Florida State are moving a conference game over there. Mm-hmm. So who they would play and when they would play, I don't know, but is something he would like to see happen. And it would be rather historic for LSU, very historic. LSU's only played out of the country one time. That was in 1907. They played in Havana.
That's right.
Against Havana University. And so it has not happened in a very long time, but it's a cool proposition and something that I think would be, as you said, of great. If people are excited about LSU playing in Las Vegas, I think they're going to be excited about seeing them play in Ireland.
Just to be clear, now there's still a lot of details to be worked out, almost all the details to be worked out, but this is not as pie in the sky maybe as one would have thought.
No.
A week ago at this time, because they've actually contracted with a company.
No, they've got a company that makes these games happen.
Right.
And so it's just finding the right opponent and the right time. Obviously, it'd be a season opener. You would figure, I think Florida State and Georgia Tech are playing on August 24th. So very early.
Week zero
game.
Opener.
Yeah, a week zero opener. Those things have to be worked out, but I think if they want it to happen, it'll happen, and it's obviously an exciting prospect. When the Saints play overseas, when LSU playing overseas,
people make
really
week-long
cool.
vacations out of it.
Absolutely,
they make it a destination thing. Wilson, we were sort of kicking this around right before the mics got hot, as they say, and we don't suspect that this will be in the next couple of. We don't know anything about anything really, but we don't suspect that just because of the commitments that are already on LSU's schedule. We don't suspect that this will be soon.
No, I mean, and there'd be a lot to figure out. I'd be curious, just because we, sat down to record this, haven't had the time to look at like maybe when that Florida State Georgia Tech game like was announced compared to now when it's getting played. That might be instructive for us to look at later. But if it was to be a non-conference game, like LSU's already got a home and home scheduled with Clemson for 2025, 2026. Mm-hmm. So if it was, like you said, to probably be like that season, they would have to maybe move that around if they were going to fit in something to start the season. If it was, which is doable, but that would make me believe anyway that the earliest you might see this happen is 2027. Mm-hmm. If so, they don't have a whole lot like scheduled past that. You've also got the SEC, conference schedule still kind of up in the air past 2025. And so we don't know exactly. There's a lot of sort of, factors and moving pieces that are part of this. I think the SEC schedule being unset is probably kind of a big one as well. Because if it's going to be a conference game, then the SEC is going to be involved, and they don't even have their schedule format set past 2025.
That's right. That's a very good point. We discussed that as well. The SEC sticking with an 8-game schedule this year. They just made sure that everyone plays Texas or Oklahoma, and they're just flipping the games next year. So Oklahoma comes here to end the season this year, and 2025 LSU goes to Oklahoma, for example. Beyond that, we don't know. Brian, echoing what everyone else who keeps saying is they feel that they will eventually get to a 9-game schedule. He said, especially, again, tying this into NIL and revenue sharing, with more revenue being needed to share with the players eventually, the revenue from a 9th SEC game, getting more money from ESPN and ABC and the TV contract, which the SEC is not, which they are not compelled to give the SEC at this point, is all part of that. So there are a lot of schools that want to stick with 8 games for whatever reason, one of them being bowl eligibility. How important will that be in the future? We don't know. So many unknowns in college football. But he thinks they're going to get to a 9-game schedule. And so to Wilson's point, could you get them to move again? I don't think LSU is going to sacrifice a home game to go play in Ireland. But could you get a conference opponent who's maybe not quite as
Mississippi State?
Let's use them as an example.
I'm not picking on them, but maybe the company says, "Hey, this payout that we can give you is more than you can generate from a regular home game."
Right, and so a game that would be, and LSU's not playing State, for example, this year or in 25. So, but say they're on the schedule again in 27. To use Wilson's year, and they say, it's the game's going to be in Starkville, but would you be willing to play it in Dublin? So that could be. We just don't know. But they're going to the spring meeting again at the end of this month. I don't think anyone expects they're going to have a long-term schedule format hammered out yet again. It's kind of ridiculous in my opinion that they're not there yet. Ridiculous. Yes. But there are a lot of unknowns. But it's cool. It's clear that Kelly wants to see this happen, and I think along with, I think this would be really cool. 3 scheduling opportunities. Still have never played Michigan. That's the one program of stature that LSU has never played in football ever, and I'd love to see them play a service academy on the East Coast somewhere. To me, a Navy in Baltimore or Army in New York.
Though,
Yeah, I mean, and there's no talk of that. I'm just saying.
Just what you would want to see.
Just if you were
came here, president for a day.
Or AD, I guess. If I was the AD, I'd say let's make that happen. But this is one of the 3 cool scheduling possibilities that is out there, and it sounds like they're going to make it happen. It's in some way.
Anything else from Brian Kelly's sit down with you that you think we ought to touch on before we get out of here?
Just if people are not aware of that, a couple of rule changes this year. Helmet communications are going to be allowed. 1 player on each side of the ball. There's going to be a green dot on one player's helmet, obviously the quarterback. And then we were talking about who could it be on defense. And he says this is going to skew towards the offense. This is going to help offenses because getting the defense set, he said you're going to call 4-3 cover 2, but then you got to set the front 7 and you got to set the secondary. So you still might have to have signals coming in from the sideline to one of those position groups. It was very interesting. And there's going to be a 2-minute warning. But he's in favor of that. He's not crazy about a 2-minute warning in college football. He said, we don't need it. It's just another commercial. Our game is managed in a different way from the NFL. So, but that's coming as well. So he's kind of 50-50 there. But he's been a proponent of this helmet communication thing for a long time, and that will come to be this fall.
Curious to know.
LSU started working on it during spring practice.
Yeah, that's right. Curious to know, yes, because we did know that this is, we knew about the comms and a 2-minute warning, but it's going to be new, certainly to the fans, a new experience for all of us. Curious to see how college football didn't adopt this, not yet, but obviously there's going to be some new and strange looking at first kickoff rules with the NFL, where basically the teams are lined up off sides, for lack of a better way to put it, and they won't have this, running start where they're doing the kamikaze routine all the way down the field. Be curious to know if college football is going to be closely watching that. And I'm just purely speculating on this. We have no idea whether they're actually going to adopt it one day, but would make sense given the eternal navigation toward trying to mitigate player safety and make a violent game as safe as it can possibly be, which is sort of a weird juxtaposition.
Don't y'all think that maybe, I'm not in favor of this, that maybe the kickoff return may disappear one day from football?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I forget who this was. It was one of the Saints special teamers a couple years ago. He's made sort of his, carved out his niche in the NFL as a special teams ace. God, it's going to drive you nuts who it was. A guy from SMU, and he's like, look, man, it's called football. I mean, we're going to take the foot out of football altogether. I don't know. I can't imagine.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of it.
Yeah,
I
can't imagine.
They seem like they're inching that way.
Yes, but listen, the game has certainly evolved. All these games, would you have ever guessed that there'd be a pitch clock in Major League Baseball?
Right.
Things change.
Right.
Things do change.
Exactly right.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I'm still curious. Would like to know. Rab always kind of struck me as a keyboard player, maybe a pianist.
No, I think percussion. Tambourine is literally, if you asked me to play something today, that's the only thing I could do.
I'm still not so sure.
Like
I could
Linda
do that.
McCartney with wings, that'd be me.
Fair enough. And Wilson's got the great deep baritone voice. I'm sure he would.
I wouldn't have thought my voice. I wouldn't have described it as deep.
It's not quite baritone. No. Well, every man's voice is deeper than mine, almost. So
we're getting way off.
It's a smooth voice, very Bobby Darin-esque maybe, or something like that.
I'm pretty good in a karaoke situation.
Michael Bublé.
I'm going to tell you I am, but I'm not actually. So.